Hello and welcome to another tutorial from MOO ICT. In this tutorial, we're going to be making a Street Fighter demo using Windows Form and C#. Before we begin, I just want to state that this video is not sponsored by anyone, and this tutorial is purely made for educational purposes. All of the images and animation used in this video is owned by Capcom, so I haven't really made any of these animations, so this is purely for demo purposes. I'm simply making this tutorial with the sole purpose of teaching C# for game development in Windows Form and C#. And this tutorial is not intended for any sort of commercial purpose or for a live project. But if you do want to use any part of this tutorial for any of your own projects, please make sure just stick to the code part of it, which I have written, but do not use any of the images and so on, because obviously they are owned by Capcom. I'm a huge Street Fighter fan, and I always wanted to make something like this using Windows Form. I mean, because why not? We do all sorts of things in Windows Form, although it's not made for game development. So let's get into what this project does. So at the moment, as you can see, I have the main character, Ryu, in the scene, and I can move back and forth. Right, I can also walk to the edge of the form, and then it will scroll with the player. Right, you'll notice that the GIF animation is working and it's swapping between the images, but the background is transparent. Okay, we also have the action. I got 3 different actions for Ryu. So I have one for the heavy punch, one for the light punch, and then one for the Hadouken on there. Okay, and we can interact with the drum. So if I go near the drum again, okay, so if I do a light punch, you can see the drum moves a little bit. I have to be within the hit area. And then if I do a, I just scroll over a little bit here. If I do a heavy punch, it moves further. So we have a way to determine what the power of the attack is. And the last one is the Hadouken on there. So if I throw the fireball at the drum will move away from the screen, and then as soon as it leaves the screen, it will reset back to here. So if I move it again, I'll throw a fireball at it. So this time it's still within the screen, that's why it's still there. So if I throw another one, it gets reset. Another thing I've done with this one is I want to test to see, because this is part of my process on exploring some of the transparency and dynamically drawing things onto the form for Windows Forms. So I wanted to see if it works with different backgrounds. So if I press X on the keyboard, it changes the background. As you can see, it changes the background over. I can still scroll across with the background. And I can scroll back with it. Okay, and then I can change to another one, and it does exactly the same thing. Change again. I think I have 5 backgrounds for this project at the moment. So these are from the classic Street Fighter levels, although the Ryu character looks a lot smaller than the background characters. But it's okay. I mean, you can use any background that you want. I want to get something that's pixelated and sort of themed with the kind of demo that I'm trying to make with this one. Okay, and of course our actions still work the same. Okay, so we're not going to be using any games engine or any sort of external library to make this. This project entirely will be created using C# and Visual Studio in Windows Forms. So let's go ahead and create a new project in Visual Studio. Okay, so in this window, I want to click on Create a New Project. I'll choose my Windows Form app.net from the recent project list. Click Next. I'm going to name this one Street Fighter Demo MOO ICT. Click Next. .NET 6 is fine, so we can just click Create. Here we have our empty project right now, so I can just go ahead and the title to this one. So I'm not going to change any size or anything. This size is perfectly fine. I just want to work on something slightly smaller, so it's much easier to manage and animate inside of it. Just going to give you a title called Street Fighter Demo MOO ICT. Okay, after that, let's take a look at the resources for this project. So the resources I have are these pictures here. So here's the background images. So I got 5 backgrounds there, and it's inside of the background images folder. And then I have a GIF image that basically goes backwards. The drum, I have the Hadouken image, right? And obviously the fireball, the animating forward. I have the GIF animation, the moving forward. I got the PNG file for the drum when it gets hit. And then this is the heavy punch. And then this is the light punch. Okay, so all of these are GIF files that is going to be drawn dynamically onto the screen. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to select all of them, right click, copy the images, and right click on the project name here, open folder in File Explorer, go to bin, debug.NET 6 window, and then this is where the executable file will be generated. I can just paste all of them in there, and then we can just call it from the code. So this would be a lot easier for us to manage. Okay, so I can close that for now. Okay, so if I go to the toolbox, let's start adding some of the stuff that we need. So we only need one thing for this one actually. We just need the timer. Right, so I'm going to call this one game timer. Okay, set the enable to true. So as soon as the window loads, we want it enabled. Set the interval to 20. Then we'll come back to this one in a second. Let's go to the events window for the form. Okay, so I need a couple of events here. So I need a key down. I'm going to type in key is down. So that should add the key is down event here for us. And then I also need another one called key is up. Okay, and the main one we're going to need for the form is the paint. Okay, so let's just say form paint event, Excel, press enter, and then that adds the form paint event for us here as well. Okay, and now if I click on the timer, for the timer tick option, I'm just going to say here game timer event. So that just creates the game timer event for us. Okay, so with the game timer now added, let's write up our functions that we need for this project. Okay, let's get started with writing the functions. Let's say private void setup form. Okay, that's one of them. And then we need another one called private void setup animation. That's another one. We need a private void move player and background. Okay, we will need a other ones. Private void. This one will be move play animation. Okay, and this one will take in an argument called string with the direction, so whichever direction the player is moving. Okay, so if you're wondering what the void is there for, void is basically for if the function is not returning a value. So instead of the void, if this was like a string or a boolean or an integer or even like a list, that function must return a value back to the program. We will have one of those functions a little bit later on, and then that one will return a boolean back to the program. So in that case, we will have to have a return value inside of it. And these ones is basically just packaging instructions inside of them. So it's not like one big function. We're just modularizing them into separate functions. Okay, we need another private void called reset player. Private void set player action, and inside of there we'll have a string for animation, and an int for strength. Another private void for shoot fireball. Okay, and another one for private void check punch hit. And another private void for check fireball hit. And then lastly, so this is the function that I was talking about, so we have to say private bool by private bool detect collision. Okay, so in this case, so as you can see, is most of these are not showing up with the red line because they don't need to return a value. Because this one will have to return a value, Visual Studio is telling me that I just have to put in a return true, because it's returning a boolean, it needs to return something. So I'm just going to leave that there for now, and then we'll come back and add our stuff that we want to this one slightly later on. Okay, so these are the functions that we need. So I'm just going to scroll down on it again, just so you can check if you got all of them. Okay, and we are going to go through them one by one anyway, so once we start programming them, we should be able to check it. Okay, so let's start adding our variables that we need. So these are the global variables we're going to need for this one. So right above the form 1 line there, so it says public form 1, I'm basically going to start adding our stuff. So first I'm going to declare the images that we need. So I'm going to say image player. Another image we need is for background. Another image we need is for the drum. Another image is for the fireball. Okay, and we also need to import a namespace as well, because in this tutorial what we're going to do is we're going to load up the GIF images, and we also need to count the frames. So because the action happens, the way the action happens is Ryu punches and then he retracts his arms in. So if we want to check for collision, we need to make sure that when the punch is actually happening, that's when to register the hit. So this is why we need to count the frames from the GIFs. So to do that, we need a namespace. Yeah, so we're going to say using system.drawing.imaging. Okay, and I'll show you how to use that properly in a minute. Okay, so after the namespace been added, now we can go back to the, I'm just going to leave that over here. We can go back to adding our global variables. So we need few integers. So we're going to int for say player. So we can say player x is equals to 0. In player y, we can give a value of 300. That's where the y location of the player will be. Then we need an int for drum x is equals to 450. Drum y is equals to 335. And then we need a int for fireball x is equals actually we don't have to give you a value just yet, because we're going to dynamically create this one when we press the button. Let me say int fireball y. Okay, and we're also going to need a integer for drum move time. So this is how long we want to animate the drum. We can leave it at 0 for now. In action strength, we can also put that to 0 for now as the default value. Int end frame 0. Background position to 0. And total frame 0. And bg number, give that equals to 0 as well. And then we also need a float. We're going to call this one num, and then we'll just leave that empty as it is. Okay. So the float, the reason we were using the float is because I want to slow down animation a little bit. So how the animation gets played, and when we're calculating the frames of the GIF, I don't want it to go too fast. So that way we can calculate it, instead of calculating from 1, 2, 3, 4, we can calculate it with like 0.5. So that way it's calculating at half a speed, depending on where it is. So we can match the action with the GIF animations playing on the screen. Okay, so next we're going to say Boolean. So we need a couple of Booleans for go left and go right. So both of them can be grouped together. We also need another Boolean for direction pressed. I'll show you the reason we're using this one, because this one kind of came handy because I couldn't figure out how to get the animation to play when the buttons are pressed. So I sort of found a hack in basically in Visual Studio and Windows Form to keep the animation playing when the game is running. Okay, so bool playing action. So this is to check if any of the action buttons are pressed. So whether the light punch, heavy punch, or the Hadouken button is pressed. And then we say boom, shot fireball. So just to check if the fireball has been shot in the game or not. We're also going to need a list. This is going to be a list of string, old background images is equals to new list of string, and then just instantiate that. Okay, so these are the global variables that we need. So there's quite a few of them. So we have our image group, we have our integers for player, for drum, fireball, and then these ones here is actually what's making the animation and stuff like that work. And then you have your float for the animation. After that we have a group of booleans, and then the list for the background images. So to begin, inside of the form1 constructor, we can just go ahead and do the setup form function here. So as soon as the form1 constructor loads, it should just run the setup form function for us. Okay, so if we come down to the setup form function here, we can add our instructions for it. So to begin, I'm going to set the style for the form first. So we want it to be optimized, double buffered, and for the user paint to be true. So that way, whenever the images are changing and when the animations are playing, it's smoother on the screen instead of it looking choppy and glitchy. Okay, so we can do that by using set style. Okay, inside of that, we're going to say, obviously, control style, all paint true. That is true. And then we also want to use another pipe symbol here. So instead of comma, let's use the pipe symbol. And then say control styles, optimized double buffer, which is, we want to set that to true as well. We got the all in WM paint, and the last one we need is the user paint. Say control style, control styles, user paint. Okay, and then we can do the comma here. Okay, and then let's set up the images. So first we need to load up all the images from the folder that we saved, right? So from the backgrounds folder here. Okay, so now let's load all the images to the backgrounds list. Okay, background images. So background underscore images is equal to directory dot get files. Right, inside of here we can give it the name of the folder. Our folder is called background, and then all the images are JPEGs. So you can say .jpg like so. Okay, and in the end of it, we're going to say to list. So it's going to enumerate through all the files inside of the background folder that ends with the JPEG file, and then save it into the images list here. Okay, then we're going to say background here. Background is equals to image.from file. And inside of here, we're going to say background underscore images, and then we can give the BG number here. Right, so because the BG number is starts from 0, so it's just basically going to select the first child from that list. Okay, and then we go to player is equals to image from file. Then our first one is called standing gif. Okay, so that's the standing one. Then we need the drum image from file, and drum is called drum.png. Okay, and then lastly we need to run the setup animation function. Okay, so this is going to basically load up the images for us, and then the setup animation is basically what's going to start the animation process. So that's what we need for the setup form function. Let's go to the setup animation function here, and then here we need to work with the frame dimension and with image animator. Okay, so let's first go with the image animator here. So image animator class, we're going to call the animate function here, and then we say I want to animate the player, and then I also want to link an event to this one. I'm going to say this on frame changed handler, like so. Okay, so it is going to show up as red because it hasn't been created yet. So, and creating that is quite easy. Let's finish the function and then I'll show you how to create this one. Okay, and then secondly, we're going to need something called a frame dimension. Okay, so this is why we're using the namespace called imaging, because inside of the imaging one we have a class called frame dimension, and that we can use to calculate how many frames are available inside of a particular GIF image. I'm going to say call it dimensions is equals to new frame dimension. Then in here we're going to say player dot frame dimension list, and then we're going to calculate from the first frame. Okay, and then in the end of after that one, I'm going to say total frame is equals to player dot get frame count, right? And then we want to calculate all of it from the dimensions. Okay, and the way the GIFs are set up, I'll show you in a minute. Basically what we're going to do is figure out where the action points can be. So for each frame, the last 3 frames are used to reset the player, right? So we're going to set the end frame of the player to total frame -3. So that way, when the hit is actually happening, we can make sure that that's when to register the hit with the drum, or to sort of create the fireball or to create the Hadouken in the game. Okay, so we're going to say end frame is equals to total frame -3. Okay, so this is how the GIFs are organized at the moment. So for the first light punch, it's got 5 frames in there. So if we go to the total frames, it's going to have 5 frames, and then we minus the 3, right? And then this is where we want to register the hit, because after that it's just resetting the hit back. Same happens with the heavy punch, right? So heavy punch has 8 frames, and then we minus the 3, then the last one here, and the number 5 is where the register the hit is being registered, right? And then the last one is the fireball or the Hadouken one, right? So this one has 14 frames, right? So it goes through the prep and then goes all the way through. And then what we want to do is we want to cancel out the first 3, and then at number 11 frame we want to create the fireball so it looks like it's being created, and then you can reset back to normal again. Okay, so this is why we're using the end frame, then reducing 3 from there. Okay, so I hope that helped explaining that part. Now what we can do is, if you just hover over the red line underlined there and then just say show potential fixes, and then just click on the last one, we want to create a method called on frame changed handler. Okay, so if I click on that, it's just going to create one right under the setup function, right? So I'm going to delete that line from this. I don't want it to throw an exception, so I'm just going to say this dot invalidate instead. So it just needs to update the frames, right? So anytime it's running, whenever it gets called to change the frame, you just need to update the image. That's all we want it to do. Okay, so just to check, let's go ahead and add some of the stuff to our paint event, so then we can actually run it and see if the background, the player and the drum, they are being painted onto the screen. Okay, so if we go to the form paint event here, I'm going to say e.graphics.draw image. Right, first let's draw the background. Okay, and then say new the background, I'm going to say new point. So I just need to give it a new point of background position, and then for the X, and then 0 for the Y. Okay, so the background position variable is 0 anyway, so we want to position it as 0, 0. Okay, so it's going to be it's basically going to edge right here, and then the Y position is going to be 0 in the corner. Okay, and then we need to do this again. Okay. Graphics.draw image, and then we're going to call player, say new point, player, new point, player X, and then player Y. Okay, which is fine. And then we also need for the drum, graphics.draw image. We're going to paint the drum here, say new point, drum X, and then drum Y. Okay, so these are the three things that's being painted on the screen at the moment. I think I can run this one and see if it actually shows up on the screen there. Okay, so see, at the moment we have our background being painted on the screen. We have the full background being painted. We have Ryu that's positioned properly. The drum is being positioned as well. Okay, now obviously you'll also notice that it's not animating. Okay, and there's several reasons for that, because we have to run a update frame function that basically needs to animate, that needs to be called for every frame that's inside of the GIF. Because we're not using any picture boxes, we simply drawing an image on the screen, so we have to draw each of the independent frames separately or independently on the screen. Okay, and that we can do inside of the game timer. So inside of the game timer here, we can say this.invalidate. Okay, and we also can call the update frame as an image animator to update frames. We can call that one. So by adding these two lines, that should be able to animate the frames for us. So if I go back to running it again, so as you can see, now you can see the Ryu animating on the screen. Okay, I can't move anything or do any of that. Let's incorporate the background change first, and then we can go into moving Ryu on the screen. Okay, so to do the background change, I'm going to go to key up. Yeah, so let's do the key is up first. Okay, so we're just going to incorporate background change using the X key. I'm going to say if e.key code is equals is dot X. Right, so if the X key is pressed on the keyboard, I also need to check if bg number is still less than background underscore images dot count. So however many images that we loaded into the list, and then we also need to do a -1. Otherwise this will go out of bounds and it will crash the program. Okay, and then we're going to say bg number is going to be ++. So as long as it's inside the bound, perfectly fine. Else, so if it goes outside the bound, we're going to say bg number is going to be equals to 0. So we reset it back to 0 again, and we're doing this inside of the keys up. Okay, so we have our main if statement for the keys. Inside of there we have got one if statement and an else statement. One is checking if the bg number, the integer, is still inside of the bound, so it's still in under the limitations of the however many images are loaded inside of the background images. As soon as it goes over them, it will reset. So if we press X, if it's still under, it's going to add 1 to the bg number variable. Okay, so under the if statement here, we're going to say background is equals to image from file, then background images, and then we pass in the bg number here. Okay, so it's going to be changing when we press X, so you should be able to update it for us. Okay, and then we also want to set background position back to 0. Okay, draw move time, we're going to set that to 0 as well. And then from X, we'll set that to 300. So this is so when the player, if you press X when the game is running, so say for example you punch the drum and you press X, we don't want the drum to keep on moving when it goes to the new background, we want everything to be reset so you can play it again. Okay, so this is where the background position being reset, drum move time is being reset, and drum X is being reset here. Okay, I'm just going to get rid of the empty spaces from here. I think we can try this out. Okay, so right now we have the layer moving on there. Okay, press X, it goes to the second background, press X again, third background, X again, fourth, fifth, and then back to 1. Okay, perfect. Okay. Okay, so now with the background done, let's try to move the player back and forth, where we can track, where the player is moving into and moving inside of the form. Okay, so let's go to the keys down event just above it. Okay, let's go to the keys down event. Inside of here, I'm going to say if e.keyCode is equals keys.left, right? And we need to make sure that the direction is pressed. Okay, so direction is pressed. Okay, and I'll show you without this one a little bit later on why we're using this one. Okay, so direction is pressed, and then we're going to say move player animation, and we need to give it a string inside of this one, so we're going to move left in this case. Okay, and then we can say if e.keyCode is equals keys.right, and direction pressed is false. So we're going to make sure, so the exclamation mark basically means if the boolean that we're looking for is false. Okay, and then we can say move animation to the right. Okay, so that's all we need for the keys down event. Okay, so let's do the move player animation function, which is right here, I believe, right under the on frame change handler. Okay, so instead of here, we're going to say if direction. No, that's move player background. Sorry, that's the one we need to go in the underneath one. Yeah, that's the move player and background. So that one is running the timer. Okay, so I'm just going to paste that over here. So I'm going to say if direction is equals to left. Right. So if we pass in the value left inside the parameters there, right, then I'm going to say go left is going to be true. And then I'm going to change the player image to image.fromFile to backwards.gif. Okay, and then we're going to check for right. So if direction is equals right, go right is going to be true. And then player is going to be equals to image.fromFile to forwards.gif. Okay. Right, so these are relatively self-explanatory in that case. After we've done these, what we want to do is we want to say direction pressed. We're going to set that to true, because we're checking if the direction pressed is false when we press it. And I'll explain why we need that a little bit later on. Say playing action, we're going to set that to false, because at the moment we're moving backwards and forwards, so we don't want the player to be able to punch and move, or do Hadouken and move and stuff like that. So when you're moving, we want to cancel out any action that you're doing. Okay, we also need to run the setup animation function because the animation here is going to change, so we need to reload the player inside of the player animation one. So it's basically going to reload the frames, get the frame numbers and so on. Okay, and right after that we need to, so to test this out at the moment, it's not going to do anything because it's not moving inside the timer. So what we need to do is we actually need to do the player move and background function here and call that from the timer, so we can see how the player is moving back and forth. Okay, so let's do the player move first, and then we can move the background as well right after. we can say if go left. We can just say if inside of there you can say if the x is still greater than 0, so we don't want it to go outside of the form. Let's say player x is minus equals 6. And we can just hard code the numbers in there because there's only one player. Another way you can do this is you can transfer that into an integer and then test out that with different values. Because I already tested it out with 6 and it worked out just fine, so I'm just leaving it there. And then we can do it for the right. If go right is true, so notice the reason I'm saying go right is true is because there's no explanation point in front of it. Okay, so if go right is true, then you would say if the x plus player dot width, right, is less than this dot line size dot width. So if it's still inside of the form, from the right side, we can say player dot x plus equals to 6. So this one's moving the player to the left, and this one will be pushing the player to the right. Okay. Then to run this, we need to call this function here from the timer. So if I go back to the timer event, right under the animated forms, I can just paste this line with a semicolon to end the line there. Okay, so move player and background. So at the moment, it's just going to probably move the player. Okay, so let's see. So as you can see now, I can move the player to the edge there, and then for some reason my left is not working. Oh yeah, that's because I still need to do the key up bit because I haven't reset that yet. Okay, so inside the key is up one, we can say if e.key code is equals keys dot right, or e.key code is equals keys dot left. So if either one of these buttons are released, you can just say go left is equals to false, go right is equals to false as well, and then direction pressed is equals to false in this case as well. And lastly, we need to run the reset player function. That's going to reset the animation back to just standing, right? So whenever the buttons are released. Okay, we can try that out now. So let's move that way, move back. As you can see right now, the animation doesn't reset, right? So if I move forward, it's moving forward. If I move backwards, it continuously moves backward. Okay. Now I wanted to show you why we're using the direction pressed one. So I'm just going to comment this line out from here, so it's not false. And I also want to comment out, remove that one from the key. Remove it from one of them, so I don't remove from both of them, right? So just remove that. So you don't have to do this one. This is just to demonstrate why we need this one. Okay, and I can remove it from this comment out from here. Okay, so if I run this at the moment, you'll notice something that, okay, so see, it animates it once and then it stops. Okay, that's because the program is trying to basically load the same image over and over again as many times as we hold it down, because that's what it's doing. So it's checking to see if this is true, do this, and then just load this over and over again, right? So what we need to do is something needs to just switch on the light, and then instead of just switching and pressing it down, right, we just need to switch it on and say, okay, this is on, you don't have to load it again, right? It's been changed once, it doesn't have to be changed over and over again. So this is why we're using the direction pressed variable. Okay, I'm just going to undo that, undo that one from there, and then also undo that from here. Okay, so that's been undone. So I've just got them all set up back to where how it was before. Okay, so this is why we're using the direction pressed one, because as soon as it's false, right, as soon as it's true again, it's basically just not going to run this function again, right? So it's just going to run it once and then it's going to leave it. So even if you hold it left, it's basically just changing the position in the timer rather than loading the same image over and over again to the program. So it's not loading these over and over. It's basically just going to run this function inside of the timer instead. Okay, so by doing that, we actually get this nice little animation playing without needing to load the image over and over in the program. We're just using that as a switch. Okay, so let's do the reset player function here. So if I go to reset player, okay, I can just say player is equals to image from file. Okay, and then I'm going to change it back to standing.gif. Okay, run the setup animation again. Set num to 0, and then playing action to false, because it's been reset, so we're not playing any sort of action. And the num is for the animation timer. So when we do the hit testing, we're going to need this value here to check whether we reached a certain frame, whether we can register a hit or not. So we're resetting all of these back to normal as soon as the reset player function is going to hit. So let's try that now. Move that here so you can still see the code. So if I press left, I'm moving it. As soon as I release, the player is now reset. Back, release, right, sorry, not left. So release, reset, reset. Okay, that looks quite nice. All right, so now let's move the background with the player. Right, so if we go back to the move player and background function, so inside of the go left if statement, I'm just going to go under that one and say if background position is less than 0, okay, and the x is less than 100. So we reached to so I want Ryu to reach at least here before the background starts scrolling that way, right? So the background is going to reverse scroll based on the player. So if the player is moving left, the background is to move right to give the parallax effect. Okay, so this is why we're going to say background position is going to be plus equals to 5 instead of minus equals to, and then we also want to move the drum along with the background. And that's going to be plus equals to 5 as well, because they both need to move around the same speed. Okay, so that's for the left value. And then inside of the go right if statement here, under that one, I'm going to say if background position plus background width, background dot width is less than, oh no, sorry, this one's going to be greater than this dot line size dot width, and we'll also give it a 5 just as a buffer. So if the background position and the background width is still greater than, so if the background is still overlapping on the background from the form size, so there's still more background image left on the right side, then we can scroll the background towards the left. Okay, and we want to make sure like the player is at least like near the right when we are pressing the right key. Okay, so player X is greater than at least 650 pixels, right? So if that's the case, we can move the background towards the left. Okay, so background position is minus equals to 5, and then drum X is minus equals to 5 as well. Okay, so if player is moving right, the background is moving left, and if player is moving left, the background is going to be moving right. Okay, so let's try that. So at the moment, the background is, X is till 0, so it's not less than 0, right? So as soon as we move it, so right now the background's X is going to move, it's going to be 0, because at the moment the background here, the X position of the background has dropped quite a bit, right? So because we still have more background left on this side, it's still going to be scrolling it. Okay, and then when we move it this way, okay, as you can see, now the reuse is stuck because there's no more background to go through. If I change the background, it still does the same thing. Okay, so long as the image is still longer than the form, it's going to scroll it. Okay, I think one of the ways to, if I make the window larger right now, it's not going to work, because at the moment it only works with a smaller window of this size. Because I find like this size was manageable for me to make something like this in. Okay, so we're going to change the background. So if we use here and I change the background, you'll see that it's, at the moment, I'm still able to scroll the background because this is a new one, and then the background position has been reset to 0. Okay, and then the drum will appear as well. Okay. Okay, so there's no action done yet. So yeah, right. So we got all of that working. Please make sure that you save your project as frequently as possible, because you've done quite a lot of work at this point. So it's not, it won't be fair if you just, it accidentally closes on something or you lose something. You can always come back to the tutorial, but it's good to have the habit of frequently changing your project as much as possible. Okay, so we got up to the reset one. Now we can get to actually the, setting the action for the player. Okay, let's go to the key up event first, and then we can set up the action there first, and then we can come back to the functions slightly after. Okay, so right under the key code, keys right, keys left. Let's make a space here. We're going to say if e.key code is equals keys, please, keys dot a. So let's say the A button is pressed and playing action is false, and go left is false, and go right is false as well. So if all this condition is true, then we can say set play action to first punch, right? So actually this one's going to be the second punch, because punch 1 is the heavy punch. We want the A key to register with the light punch. So we're going to say punch 2 dot gif, right? And then inside of that, punch 2 is the light one, so the action strength for this one is going to be 2. Okay, so it's just going to have like 2 damage or something. Okay, what we're going to do with this one is we're going to determine how far the drum should move based on the action strength. Okay, so the similar thing is going to happen with the second one, so I'm just going to copy and paste this if statement here. So A, then this one's going to be for S. Okay, so for the S key, if all of this is true, then we want to run the punch1.gif. So we want to set that punch1 to the player, and this one's damage is going to be 5. Okay, and then this third one is going to be with the D key, the fireball one, and we also want to add one more condition there to say if shot fireball, right? So if the shot fireball is false, then we can generate another fireball animation. Okay, so say fireball.gif, and then this one's damage is going to be 30. Okay, so this one's damage is going to be 30 because it's the fireball and is being as a projectile. Okay, so let's do the set play action now. Scroll down to the set play action function here. So right now, you can see it's been referenced 3 times, and that's all from the key is up event, right? And we're going to say player is equals to image.from file, and then we want to just transfer the animation in there, because that's the animation is the name of the file that we want to transfer, right? And then the action strength is equals to strength, like so. So you're just transferring the value into that integer. We want to do setup animation. It animates the action that we're trying to play, and then we'll set player action equals to true, false. Okay, so we want to set play animation to true. Okay, so to make this one work, we'll have to do a little bit of a tweaking of the animation inside of the timer event. So let's do that now quickly, and let's go find the timer event. So here we have our timer event there. So I'm just going to move it down a little bit, so we can still add a couple more functions here if we need to. And then I'm just going to put the if statement here. Let's say if playing action right? So if the action is playing, and then if the num is still less than the total frames, okay, then we want to increase the num by 0.5. Okay, so there's a num plus equals 0.5f because it's a float, right? And this is why we're slowing it down, because we don't want the action to be played too quickly, so that way the hit won't register if it's done too quickly. So if it's done slowly, then we can still figure out whether to reset the frames, reset the animation, or reset the player, or to check for collision and when the punch hit or when the fireball hit, and so on. And then right after that one, we're going to also say if num is equals total frame. So if it's still less than the total frame, and then if it's equals to the total frame, then we just want to reset the player. Okay, as soon as he hits exactly the same frames as the frames available, then we're just going to reset the player here. Okay, so if we run this now, I'm going to move it forward a little bit, so let me see if it works. Okay, so there you go. So I'm pressing the A key and it's doing the light jab. Okay, and then pressing the S key, it's doing the heavy punch. Okay, and then if I press the D key, it does the fireball animation. Okay, I think here we can see Ryu better. Yeah, the animation quality is amazing. Okay, so I can't do it when I'm moving. So if I'm moving, I'm pressing the buttons, I won't be able to do it. But if I'm stand still, then I will be able to do it. Yeah, so this is one way to sort of limit the player from mashing too many buttons together, I suppose. Okay, so that's good. So far, so good on that one. Okay, so now let's create the fireball, I think. Okay, so we can create the fireball and see the fireball actually, go from Ryu generating it all the way through, and then we can do the hit testing right after. Okay, so perfect. The shoot fireball function is the next one. So here we're gonna register the fireball image first. So we can say fireball is equals to image.from file. Then we just say fireball final. If okay, so that's just the fireball image. So the one we used before is the animation for Ryu moving into the fireball stance. Okay, and we also need to register the image animation for this one as well. So let's say image animator dot animate. Okay, fireball, and then we just say this dot on frame change handler, because we already created the event handler there. It's going to register it for us. So that way, as soon as he loads up, he should be able to animate using the image handler. Then we need to give the fireball X and Y value. Okay, so fireball X is going to be equals to player X plus player width minus 50. Right, so that's where the arms basically is. So basically, when the player's doing the Hadouken stance, we don't want it to just appear from nowhere. We want to make it look like he's actually generating the fireball from his body. Okay, so that's why we're doing the fireball X, then player X plus player width minus 50. So it's 50 pixel into the player's image. Right, and then fireball Y, player fireball Y is equals to player Y minus 33. So it's 33 pixels down. So it's sort of in the middle of the where the Ryu character is. And then lastly, we're going to say shot fireball is equal to true. That's it shot the fireball. Okay, so if we go to the timer event, we should be able to start animating the fireball and then use the paint event to draw the fireball on the screen. Okay, so let's go to the timer event again. So right under the playing action bit, we can start with the fireball things. So say fireball, 9-ball, fireball instructions. Okay, so right here, I'm going to say if short fireball. Okay, so if short fireball is true, then fireball X is going to be plus equals to 10. So we're going to move it towards the right side of the screen with the speed of 10 pixels per millisecond. Okay, so and then we can check for hit test later on. Just as a reminder to check for hit test for the fireball here. Fireball hit test. Okay. All right, so that's because the fireball is going to be moving if it's true. After that, we're going to say if fireball X is greater than this dot client size dot width. So if the fireball has left the screen from the right side, then we can just say show fireball to false, because we don't want to draw the fireball past the screen. Okay, so that would be there's no point because you can't see it anymore. Okay, and lastly, we'll have to determine when to shoot the fireball. Okay, because the fireball action's already been set in the D key here, and then the shot fireball will be determined whether we can shoot a fireball or not. And there's several things to do with this one at the moment. So let's put in all the conditions that we need. So all the Boolean expressions are going to be put into this if statement. Let's say shot fireball, right? So if we not already shot a fireball or the fireball Boolean is false, and we want to make sure the num is greater than end frame. So we don't want to shoot the fireball if the fireball shouldn't appear if the num is still in the beginning of the frame. So if the animation is still playing, we don't want to shoot the fireball. We want to shoot the fireball right by the end frame, because don't forget the end frame is going to be reduced by 3 from the total frame. So that's where the action is. So the last part of the action, we want to generate the fireball at that point. Okay, so frame, and we want the drum move time. We want to set it to 0. So we don't want the drum to be moving at that time. So if you're punching and then you're doing the fireball, we want the drum to be standstill when the fireball is happening. Okay, and then we can do do another 2 and say action strength. Action strength is equals 30. So we're using this one so the fireball doesn't just appear if you're just doing a light punch or a normal punch, light punch or a heavy punch. We wanted to make sure that the strength of the fireball matches with the action that we're taking. So if all of these conditions are true, that's when we're going to shoot the fireball. Okay, so that's when it should appear on the screen. Okay, so at the moment it would still work, but it's not going to draw anything on the screen because we're not drawing the fireball yet. So to do that, we have to put it inside of the paint event. The paint event is over here. Okay, so paint event is there, and inside of that one, we're just basically going to say if shot fireball is true. So if the Boolean is true, then we're going to say if graphics dot draw image, then we can say fireball. All right, and inside of that, there's a new point to fireball X, and then fireball Y. Okay, so basically just going to draw the fireball on top of it. So this is all layered. So first layer is background, second layer is player, third layer is drum, and then if the fireball is shot, then we're gonna draw the fireball on top as well, and it will animate as long as that Boolean is true. So as soon as that's false, it's not going to animate it anymore. Okay, so we can try to run this now. Change the background maybe to this one so we can see it better. So press D. As you can see, the fireball is, if you notice so it doesn't generate it right as the animation is playing, it generates it right at the frame after it's gone past that main frame, right? So it looks like it's coming out of his hand then. It's so cool. Okay, and then we obviously, it would work in any of those backgrounds, fine. We can just change the background that the fireball is moving. That's cool. All right, so we got our action, light punch, heavy punch, and then Hadouken. Okay, and I can move it. I can move forward. I'll do it here. Perfect. Okay, so the thing that's left to do at the moment is to do the hit testing for all the actions that we're taking. Okay, so to do that one, we need to finish the last function that we created, which is the detect collision, because these two functions here are going to depend on this one, what this one returns back. Okay. So the way we're going to do this one is going to be slightly trickier, because a image that's being drawn onto the screen, it doesn't have a intersect with function such as a rectangle or a picture box. So we have to manually check if one object is overlapping with another one. So we have to check on all four corners of all four directions of the image, and then make sure if it's overlapping with each other, then it's a collision. If it's not, then it's not a collision. So that way we can determine whether to return a true or a false in this function. Okay, so it's going to take a lot of parameters inside. So let's see if we can do this one perfectly fine in the first go. Okay, so it's going to be all integers. So go with the integer here, and let's call it object1x. Right, so that's the first object. So the way collisions work is we need two objects to compare against. So we have to have object1, and then we'll also have to have object2. So, and then we do a second integer called object1y, and then we need to int object1 width, int object1 height. Okay, so we need object1x, y, width and height. Then we need object2x, object2 object2y, int object2 width, int object2 height. Okay, so we have got all of them. So we've got your object1x, y, width and height, object2x, y, width and then height. Perfect. Okay, so if you think about it this way, is the way we're working is this is object2, so this could be the drum that we're dealing with, right? And what we are working with is we're going to do an if statement where we're going to check if object1x plus object1 width is less than object2's x position, which is here. Okay, so if we are outside of it, then there's no collision. But if object1x is greater than or equals to object2x plus width, so that this position here and the object1 is over here, then there's no collision either. We're also checking from the top side, and we're also going to be checking from the bottom side. Now if any of these things are true, so any of these things are not true, basically means that the object is inside of the area for the object2. So basically they are colliding. Okay, so let's try to do that inside of a if statement with the code. Okay, so I'm going to say if object1x plus object1 width is less than or equals to object2x, right? So that's dealing with the left side. Or object1x is greater than or equals to object2x plus object2 width, that's dealing with the right side. Or object1y plus object1y or object1 height, y height, is less than or equals to object2y, or object1y is greater than or equals to object2y plus object2 height, not object2y height. Keep saying that. Okay, so here we're dealing with the left, the right, the up, and then the downside of this, right? So if any of these is true, right, then there's not going to be any collision. So we can just say return false, right? So there's no collision. So the boxes or the area of each of them are outside. Okay. Now else, Basically else means that, you know, if any of them are false, so if it's colliding with any side of it, we can just return true. So it's going to return false if any of them are true, and then we're going to return true if all of, you know, any one of them is false. So basically it can be colliding from the left, from the right, from the top, or from the bottom. Okay, so at this point we can probably use this to create the last two functions that we have. Okay, so let's do the check punch hit one first. It's going to be the smaller hit on the drums, and then after that we can do the check fireball hit one for the larger hits. Okay, so we say bool collision, right? So and then we're going to say detect collision function. So and then now we can pass in all the variables that we need. So obviously we need the player X at the moment, so because we comparing between the player and the drum, and then we need the player Y, player dot width, player dot height. Okay, and then we also need the drum X, drum Y, drum dot width, and then drum dot height for that. Okay, so we need 4 pairs of information based on any of the 2 objects that we have on the screen. Okay, and then we can say if collision, right? So if the collision happens, and we also need to make sure it and we playing an action, right? So and the action is playing, so we either doing the light punch or the heavy punch, and we want to make sure that, you know, we're at the end of the frame, whichever action that we're playing, right? So we can say num is equals to end frame, so num is greater than end frame, not equals to. Okay, it's the similar way that we done the fireball one. Okay, then we can basically move the drum based on the action strength. So we can say drum move time is equals to action strength. So we're going to move the drum whenever we hit a light punch or we hit a heavy punch. Okay, so let's go and do that now in the timer. Where's the timer gone? Here we are. So we're going to check the collision first. So let's check hit, no fireball hit, check punch hit, right? So check the punch hit first. Right, so this is just basically going to run every frame just to make sure that, you know, if we hit the drum anytime, and we also need to animate the drum underneath here. Okay, so we're going to say if drum move time is greater than 0, so there's a value inside the drum move time. Okay, we want to drum move time is going to be minus minus, so we're going to reduce it each frame. Drum X is plus equals to 10, no, equals to 10, plus equals to 10. So however long the action frame is, we want to move it 10 pixels to the right. Okay, and then drum is equals to image from file, so the hit drum PNG here. Okay, so long as it's, you know, above 0, it's going to be showing the hit drum PNG, and then it's going to be moving toward the right. Else, we're going to reset the drum again, drum back to image from file, and then reset it back to drum.png. Okay, and we also want to reset drum move time to 0, so it doesn't just move anywhere else. Okay, one other thing we can do is if the drum moves away from the screen, so if it's gone too far across the screen, so if you Hadouken it all the way to the corner and it's not visible in the screen anymore, we want to reset it back to 300. Okay, so if drum X is greater than this dot line size or width, if it's gone, you know, off the screen somewhere, then we're gonna reset drum move time back to 0, and then drum X is going to be 300. So you can just be repainted back to where you can interact with it again. Okay, so the moment we added the drum move time inside the timer, so if there's any value, it's just going to be animating it towards the right with the new image. And as soon as that reduces down to 0 or below, it's going to reset the drum, and then it's just going to stop the movement. And if the drum's moved past the screen, we want it back into the screen again, we can interact with it. Okay, so we can try that with the punch. So at the moment we're not doing the fireball yet. Fireball's going to go inside of the short fireball if statement here. We're going to check the punch hit. Okay, so the punch hit has been added. Let's try to run that now. Okay, so we're back here. We'll try with the light punch. Here we go. Okay, light punch, punching away. And then now if I do a heavy punch, there you go. So see, it's been moved away from the screen and then it reset back to here. Okay, I can punch, do a heavy punch, it moves further. If I do a light punch, it moves a little bit. But if I do a heavy punch, it moves further down. Nice. Yeah, very good. All right then, so last thing to do is the fireball hit. So the fireball, at the moment we're checking the player and the drum because that's the two collision that's happening. For the fireball one is going to be the fireball and the drum. So I can just copy that, to be honest. Put it inside of there and just change that to the fireball. We change the player X to fireball X. Fireball Y. Fireball and then fireball here. Okay, so that's done. And lastly, we're going to need to check for collision, right? So in this case, we know the fireball is going to basically, we don't need to do any of that playing action or anything like that, because when the fireball is on the screen, it needs to hit the drum or miss the drum, right? So we can just check for the collision. So we can just say collision. So if the collision is true, we want to move drum, move time is going to be equals to action strength. Action strength there. And then shot fireball is equals to false. Because when the fireball hits the drum, we want to make the fireball disappear from the screen because it's already done its job there. And that's about it really. It doesn't need to do anything else. So then the player can shoot the fireball again once the drum stops animating. Okay, so this function, we need to run it inside the timer, but inside of the if statement. Let's scroll up a little bit. Let's scroll up to where I left a comment there. Then I can just paste that in here. Okay, so we want to check for the fireball hit. There, and then let's go and run it again. Okay, so now moment of truth. Let's go. So I'm going to press the D key. Nice. Okay, so as you can see, the fireball goes and it hits the drum. Okay, and it disappears. And as soon as it pushes it off the screen, it resets back again. This is, well, to be honest, I was quite impressed with the frame rate. I mean, you know, the way it works in Windows Phone and the fact that we're redrawing so many different things on there, and it actually stays within the a relatively good frame rate. I mean, it's quite impressive. I mean, you know, you can't really make like a full Street Fighter game in this one because, you know, you'll need some sort of engine to work with. But the fact that we can sort of make stuff like this in Windows Form and using Visual Studio while working with C# and just a normal C# code is pretty amazing. And I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. And if you have liked it, please leave a like and a subscribe to the channel. It would help me out a lot and help me make this kind of stuff a lot more in the future. So hope you have a good day, and I will see you on the next tutorial. Take care.